Hey, it's Matt. I'm back with another transparent watercolor. This is a little black-capped chickadee. It's a small painting. It's only 7 by 10 inches, but it was a load of fun to do. Chickadees always amaze me at how tough they are, that they're these tiny little birds and that they can survive these just horrifically cold winters in Michigan. So I wanted to do one in their kind of winter wonderland painting here. I got a nice photo reference from out the kitchen window. I started by masking off the bird in the main stick of the background and then went about washing in some of the main background colors. I used a lot of different blues and purples and pinks to do these, just to kind of build some depth to it. And I was trying to work really fairly wet for this and only had the sharp edges where I really needed them. And would hit it with the hairdryer in between things to kind of set in the colors so I could make another wash on top of it. So for the more purpley tones, I would go with the ultramarine blues and then bring in a little bit of dioxazine purple, and sometimes I'd bring in a little bit of the quinacridone magenta for the pinks. And then for the blue-green areas, I was using more phthalo blues, just to kind of change up the color temperature of the snowy colors. So for the foreground, I'd have some more pinks kind of, and then as it receded into the background, I'd have these blue-greens. Snow is such an interesting thing. It can take on so many different colors depending on the time of day, how old the snow is, what your lighting's like. And the other thing is how deep it is. If you're looking through layers of it, how it picks up the shade from the sky. So it really is. It's an interesting thing, and there's no one recipe really for painting snow, but for this particular scene, this is how I did it. I think most of the painting at this point was with the number 2 round brush. Some of the bigger areas I'd pull out the number 6 and number 4. And really, I spent a lot of time just getting the background where I wanted it. I wanted a lot of detail in the foreground, but then just kind of have it be a little softer and a little less grabbing of your eye as it went back. So I tried to control some of the contrast, so it was mostly around the main branch that the bird was on, and the stump behind it with the accumulated snow. And I also had that one branch behind the bird with more of the pinks and kept more of the blue-greens and the really deep purpley parts further back, kind of just to establish a more depth. It's interesting when you see the painting done this way. You kind of get the idea of how much time is really spent on the background and relatively how little is spent on the foreground and the bird itself. A lot of the time is put into just getting the background right. Doing the background, one of the things that's interesting is that you can put these little sparks of dark color for the edges of the branches where you can barely see them, or maybe an overlapped shadow. And that really, with very little brushwork, implies a lot of depth and information. So once I was done with the background, I peeled off the frisket from the front and went about making the bird pop off the page. And so I did that with the same basic idea, bringing in the same colors for the most part, washing in the lightest local colors, and then bringing in some of the tones on the bird. And this is where you hope you didn't go too dark with your background. Because you don't want your bird to compete too much with that. Chickadees are so much fun to paint. They're beautiful birds, they have a beautiful personality, and they have this gigantic head. So it's kind of like this head on a tiny little body. They're almost like they were designed by Jim Henson or something. They're just ultra cute. So they're always fun to paint. And as I was working on the sketches for this, I realized, gee, I haven't painted a chickadee in probably 20 years. So it was fun to get to do one of these familiar friends again. I've sketched them a lot, I just haven't had time to paint them. You can see I'm still balancing out some of the information on the background. There are some areas where it's like, okay, well, now when the beak goes in, I need the background to be a little darker, or, you know, there are some overlapping areas where your frisket was that you've got to have it that bleed into the background that you had made before. And so getting all those things to balance right is it's kind of where the rubber hits the road. You got to have all those little elements meet correctly. The other thing that was hard to get a balance of was the shading of the bird and have that not disappear completely into the snow behind it, so it would logically make sense. So there's a lot of finessing of that the belly to get it to read just right. So I switched to the magnifier here to get the little details on the wing, so your view isn't as good as mine was. And I think this was a 10-aught brush. Now we're up to number 6. There's the 10-aught brush again. To get those tiny details, that definitely helps. If your other brush is super sharp, you can get a lot of the detail with the number 2 that's brand new. They do wear out. I think that on the average, a number 2 brush will last me, I don't know, probably like 3 or 4 10 by 7 paintings in that area. So you do lose the tip of those, and then they get relegated to other duties instead of the fine details. You know, I always think of chickadees as just being black and white until I go and paint them again, and then you're like, oh, they have all these beautiful tans and kind of other, you know, browny green, gray colors on the back that once you start painting them, you realize just how colorful they actually are. I love these big days, the days where you get the snow that just clings to the trees, and you have this beautiful, you know, just snow-covered branches that are holding all the limbs down, and it's just such a beautiful thing. I always feel bad for people that live in, you know, warmer climates that never get to see something so beautiful like that. And it's an amazing thing. Makes you enjoy the winter, makes it go by a little faster, which is can be good. At this point, I was just going around and finding the tiny little details that needed to be, sharpened up, or edges that needed to be cleaned up, and then I called it finished. So there you go, a 10 by 7 inch transparent watercolor of a black-capped chickadee on a snowy branch. Thanks for watching. If you get a chance, have a peek at the blog or leave a comment.